Yeah. Know what this is by now? DL47 all day for real. Very, very excited as per always. Revisiting as much rugby league information as possible. And like I always say, so you don't miss any essential rugby league information, you need to watch this video all the way through to the end. And this time we've got the 1949 wooden spoon in Australian Rugby League. And this one, a much simpler one to revisit, to go through, much simpler than the previous 6 wooden spoons. 1949, Eastern Suburbs got the wooden spoon, and it was a clear-cut, cut and dry wooden spoon. What do I mean by that? I mean that there were 18 games in the regular season, and after the first 14 games, East had managed just one single win out of the first 14 games. So that's always going to make the team end up with the wooden spoon. They did at least win a few games late in the season, but that was pure consolation. They were still getting the spoon anyway. So a clear-cut one, this time an obvious wooden spoon. Completely unlike the previous 6 wooden spoons. So if you scroll for this playlist here, you'll find all the wooden spoons from when Rugby League started from 1908 all the way up to now. But the 1943 and 1944 wooden spoon, both going to Canterbury after they were actually premiers in 1942. They plummeted down the bottom and got 2 straight wooden spoons after being premiers. The 1945 and 1946 wooden spoons, both going to South Sydney. And in 1945, South managing 1 win for the whole year. And in 1946, South losing every single game. So you mean, like the way those particular wooden spoons panned out, I find absolutely astonishing. Then in 1947, we had a neck-and-neck wooden spoon battle, and eventually Manly avoided it and gave it to Parramatta. And in 1948, Manly did the same thing again, just avoided it and gave the wooden spoon to North. But this time, it was always going to be East, like from the moment the season got underway, so to speak. And before we forget, for every wooden spooner, we go through their wins, draws, and losses for the season, their attack and their defence, and their top try and point scorer. So in 1949, Eastern Suburbs winning just 3 games, losing 14 and drawing 1 out of their 18 games. In attack, managing 214 points, but in defence conceding 351 points for the season, so the for and against minus 137. Very, very poor. And the top try scorer, a player called John Selgren, managing just 5 tries for the season. But like I said, if you watch these videos, you'll find that quite a few of the wooden spooners had players not getting very many tries and points, as you probably might expect. And his leading point scorer in 1949, a little bit better, a player called Darcy Russell, and he got no tries but 50 goals for 100 points exactly for the 1949 season. So Darcy Russell, like standing out, like the one East player that was at least doing a little bit for them. So, with that said, we then move on to every wooden spoon team's most embarrassing moment and also the moment in the sun. So, the most embarrassing moment, like I said, after the first 14 games, they had only won the one game. The only game they'd won was the 1949 round 3 game, an unconvincing 12 points to 2 win over North Sydney. And, like I said, the previous year's wooden spoon, 1948, went to Norths, and the next 2 years, 1950 and 1951, wooden spoons also went to Norths, and Norths finishing second last in 1949. So the only game that East had won after the first 14 games of 1949 was against the other team that was also like nearly as bad as them, so to speak. So the one win that they did have, not anything to cry about, and all the other games they lost, they hadn't even gotten close, hadn't been competitive, hadn't pushed any of the other teams, hadn't made any sort of threat or any sort of like mark and impact on the competition. And then that all came together and exploded on them in the most embarrassing moment, the 1949 round 14 game, with this like storm of embarrassment, humiliation building up with all these losses leading up to it. The 1949 round 14 game was easily the most embarrassing because not only did it guarantee they'd get the wooden spoon, they also lost by a horrendous margin, and they also lost to South Sydney, which, as everyone knows, East and South are the 2 worst arch enemies in the history of the game. So from an Eastern Suburbs fans' perspective, nothing worse than a huge thumping from South Sydney, guaranteeing that they got the wooden spoon. The scoreline, 1949 round 14, South Sydney 48, Eastern Suburbs 6. And like I always say, at the time, tries used to be 3 points. So in that one, South actually racked up 12 tries, believe it or not. 12 tries and 6 goals. And with 3-point tries, it's 48 points. So if tries were 4 points back then, it actually would have been 60 points to 6. It actually would have been a 60 points to 6 demolition from Rabbitohs. So nothing more humiliating, embarrassing than that. Then, after they were definitely going to get the wooden spoon, there were still 4 games left in the season that they did have to play anyway, and they did at least produce 2 consolation victories and a consolation draw, and that's obviously the moment in the song. So, after all that humiliation leading up to the South game, and then the eventual thumping from South, 1949 round 15, each produced an outstanding 15-0 win over Canterbury. So, after conceding those 12 tries against South, didn't concede a point against Canterbury, beating them 15-0 in 1949 round 15. Then in 1949 round 16, very impressive 22 points to 5 win over Balmain. Balmain, of course, one of the finalists in 1949. So where was that form? Those 2 outstanding victories there. Where was that form the rest of the season when they needed it? 1949 round 17, a loss to Western Suburbs, 34 points to 25. But that was actually something to cheer about, so to speak, because West one of the leading teams in 1949, and they did at least score the 25 points and only lost by 9 points. And then the final round of the season, 1949 round 18, East producing a 14-all draw with Parramatta. So a little bit to cry about at the end of the season, but pure consolation, as they were, as like I just said, the fact that they had only managed 1 win from the first 14 games, that guaranteed they were going to get the wooden spoon. So that one, a lot more simple to revisit it and exhume and dig up than the previous 6 wooden spoons. So there you go. And if you're still here, as per always, thank you so much for watching this video all the way through to the end, not missing any essential rugby league information. I already said the next 2 wooden spoons are going to be North in 1950 and in 1951. So that's the early 1950s, and as we get into the mid-1950s, we've got some more absolutely baffling wooden spoons coming up. So stay tuned, and I'll eventually get through those too. And you can scroll through this playlist and scroll through this channel to find hundreds, literally hundreds of other videos with imperative rugby league information if you don't want to miss any of that. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching D47.